So, g'day folks, this is Rod Whitfield here. I've got a burgeoning Sydney writer by the name of Nick Snelling on the line. G'day, Nick.
G'day, Rod.
How are you? How's things?
Good. Very good. Just, I think we had our little preamble conversation, and now I feel weird repeating it.
That's it. It's a bit like that.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, but things are good. Things are exciting at the moment. So.
Yep. So before we get into the nitty-gritties of what we're here to talk about, you've had a bit of a long and storied career in this broader industry. Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself. That's a pretty broad and open-ended question, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I lived in Melbourne for years, working in the music industry, playing in the music industry. I'd come via Byron with a bunch of mates. We'd moved down from Byron Bay, which is weird, of course, now because everyone wants to move back to Byron Bay. But, we were the OG.
Yes.
So, we kind of left Byron and came to Melbourne to, I was in a band like everyone, I suppose.
Yep.
I worked for years actually as the editor of Beat magazine in Melbourne.
Yep.
Somehow managed to bullshit my way into that job. I don't know, but that kind of lasted for about 4 years, and then I, packed up sticks again and moved to Sydney, and I've been here ever since. So.
Yep. I think I started writing for Beat around the time you left, or I'm not sure if we actually crossed paths.
I don't think we did, which is probably fortunate for you. I was a nice editor rather than a mean editor.
You get some mean ones, but mostly nice. That's good. Now, you and I have been through things at some length, but tell the uninitiated viewers out there how this collaboration with 12 Foot Ninja came together.
Oh, well, I think it depends on who you ask. I mean, it's, I'll try and tell the very short story. Yep. Essentially, I had met Steve years and years ago, Stevic as he's now known, years and years ago. He was playing in a band called Flow. Yep. We had a gig at the Evelyn together. And I remember Steve came up to me around that time. He sort of came up to me and said, "Hey man, that was really good. We should play some guitar together." And of course, I'm nowhere near the guitarist that either Steve and certainly not Ro is these days. But so that was probably where we first kind of met. And then we also had a mutual friend in Doug Bear who runs Rare Records in Melbourne. Then I moved to Sydney, a lot of water passed under the bridge, and either Steve or Steve's manager at the time reached out to review. I was working in men's publishing. They wanted their EP reviewed, and I remembered their first EP was, I loved it. And then I think I did a review for that, and I don't know, whatever. I think Steve and I exchanged a few things, and then probably another couple of years passed, and then he reached out to me again. He sort of reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've got," but I should actually clarify. Their first album had come out, Silent Machine, and I don't know if you remember, but that first album had a comic book. Not everyone got it, but it had a comic book that came with it. I never saw the comic book. I never read the comic book, so I can't actually tell you what was in it or what the story was. But Steve called me up and said, "Look, we're going to do a second album. I want to make it special. I want to make an animated story out of it, and I want to kind of, I think he grew up loving Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so he sort of kind of pitched it to me that way, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." Yeah, well, he goes, "You're the best writer I know, and can I get you to do it?" And so I was like, "Well, look, let me have a think about it." So he sent me essentially a treatment that he'd written up. It wasn't very long. I kind of wrote a treatment back, which was quite different, but he liked it. Then he was putting together a pitch Bible to take overseas to kind of pitch to some Hollywood types. And so eventually that treatment wasn't that long. He asked me to expand it to a 12 series episodic kind of thing for an animation. things went cold for a while. I think they got some bites, but it wasn't anything. I think the general consensus was we need proof of concept. We need to see like a graphic novel or something. So Steve came back to me and said, "Can you write a graphic novel?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I can," but in that time, I'd kind of started writing more, and I was like, "I actually want this to be a novel." And I think, I often make the joke that he had one story in mind, and what I ended up writing was quite different. It was almost became like the origins tale to a backstory to a prequel, if you know what I mean. So it was sort of like several steps before what he actually ever wanted written. But that said, I think over the years, and it's been a lot of tearing hair out, and I've between working full time and all that, it's been difficult, but it became a book. It became not just one book, but several books, and the first of which is an almighty tome called The Wyvern and the Wolf. The deeper I fell into it, the more I wanted it to be really good. So I probably, like a lot of writers, you end up being your own worst critic and being hyper critical and brutal about every sentence, to the point that it can become quite self-defeating in a way. But look, I'm really proud of how it's turned out. I wrote the book that I would want to read, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. And it segs beautifully into the next question, which is, just to backtrack slightly, I haven't read it myself yet. You only sent it to me week and a half ago, whatever it was. But reading...
I can act it out for you now, if you like, mate.
Okay.
I have an interpretive dance routine that I've been polishing. Actually, no, maybe finish your question first.
We've got a spare week or so for you to act it out. But just reading the blurb this morning as I was preparing for this interview, it seems mind-blowing. Just so much going on as far as characters and intertwining plot lines and massive world building and stuff like that. Being as succinct as you can, tell the viewers out there a bit about the plot and the characters and the world that you've created there, just to sort of, whet their appetites to go out and get it, when everything comes out on Friday.
Yeah, look, it's funny, like, what's the elevator pitch, essentially? I guess, it comes down to, essentially, it does have a central hero, and that hero is a young boy called Kyoshi, a young samurai boy who is orphaned in probably a horrible kind of way. We're not going to give anything away. And then he falls under the protection of the leader of a ninja clan, the Oyabun of a ninja clan, and it's a very kind of I guess post-apocalyptic world. It does have a lot of Japanese feudal tropes within the story, but that's essentially it's about this boy who gets loses his family. He's a samurai boy, aristocratic by birth, and he is basically adopted by the leader of this ninja clan and raised alongside the son, the Oyabun's son and his wife's son, that boy is called Naburu, and he has had quite a damaged experience, traumatic experience himself in the loss of his young sister. But aside from that, I mean, that's just the central plot, but there's a whole bunch of other characters that are very important. So there's this kind of weird, the book actually starts with this kind of weird character that this nameless kind of ancient creature that lives in a tree, and it saves this little girl from a kind of otherworldly, event that essentially wreaks devastation on her village. There's another storyline which is about like a kind of deranged mathematician priest who becomes obsessed with this prophecy, and there's also the story of an old samurai, like a very old kind of samurai who's about to retire, who ends up losing his lord and essentially becoming disenfranchised from anyone, and he becomes chased by assassins who want to get him, and he ends up teaming up with like a tribe of cannibals to wreak revenge on the people that, you know, killed his lord and killed his sons and everything like that. So there's a lot of kind of grim other stories that are going on, and they all sort of circle Kaioshi's story. There's also a witch, an immortal witch, one of the few good characters in the book, I should add, who you know, she kind of connects with another main character who is like a Ronin swordsman, like a very famous, or I should say infamous swordsman, who has since fallen from grace and is being hunted by the shogun. So it's set in this kind of world where there's it's post-apocalyptic, and out of the ashes of a very advanced civilization, a civilization arguably more advanced than our own, which has fallen and crumbled away. And what arose out of the ashes of that is old ways of doing things. So, one of the themes of the book is this tension between, the more advanced we become as a species, humans, ironically, there's a tension that we still slide into atavism and violence and brutality and tribalism. It doesn't matter how many scientific advancements we make, we still slide back into these old ways. Yeah, so it's set in this kind of world where there's an emperor who has been hibernating for thousands of years, who was obviously, there's some kind of preternatural force which suggests that he may not be dead, he may be undead. And then there's a kind of fanatical sect or cult of priests that protect his legacy, and they rule over the samurai, they rule over the shogun. They're called the Inquisition, the burned priests. So they're kind of like they're the real bad guys in a book that's full of lots of bad guys and a few people who fall somewhere in between.
Yep. So how does it tie in with the band, their lyrics, their music, and their imagery and their story?
I think originally originally, like when Steve first got in touch with me, was, the hope was that it was going to be a concept. It was going to be the concept that informed the next record. But, I just took too long to write the bloody thing, mate. So they came up with Outlier, which is their second album, great album. I'm a big fan of the band, I should say.
Same. So
I love the band. I don't think anyone does what they do. I think they're unique and amazing.
They are unique. They're one of a kind.
People tag them with the bungle brush, but that's only because it's almost like the only reference they can have for something that cross-pollinates so many, like a fusion of different, different styles in a way which is pretty inspired, I think. Like there's genius on display in that band all the time. So I'm probably getting sidetracked here, but like that originally it was going to be a concept that would inform their album. That didn't happen, and then with this next record, it didn't happen again, although for different reasons. I think they had other stuff they wanted to express and write about. So what I would say is that it exists in parallel to the band. The connection to the band is really Steve, in the sense that he had this idea for a story, and there is DNA that goes back to the original idea that he and Fiona had. While I worked completely autonomously and wrote the whole thing myself, the story is going, and this is just the first book, going somewhere, which will hopefully bring it all full circle. People have asked me, why would you write your first novel in partnership with a heavy rock band, and arguably a heavy rock niche kind of band? And I think it's a combination of how it all began. Realistically, if you're a first-time author anywhere, it's really difficult to get traction and a platform. And so there was a sense of like, well, we can sell a bunch of books purely through the zealotry, the kind of loyalty of 12 Foot Ninja fans. 12 Foot Ninja fans are a special breed. They love the band. They love it. They are advocates for the band. I almost said brand there. This is my advertising hat on. But it's the same thing. The band is the brand. So they, that they're passionate about the band, and it offered an opportunity to sell enough copies, or a respectable amount of copies of this book, that would then hopefully trigger other people to, take interest. I think I was saying to you offline or in our chats, books these days still very much is sold by word of mouth.
Yes.
So if you sell 500 copies of your book, those 500 people tell 2,000, who tell 10,000, who and it goes exponential from there. Or they don't tell anyone because the book's shit. So that's entirely possible. It's entirely possible here. But in terms of a strategy for why we did that, I guess it wasn't as cynical as like, yeah, let's hook up with a band and, and sell my book through them. And there's some sort of nebulous connection between what I'm doing and what they're doing. It is much more interlinked than that. And I think, it's exciting to think that we could reach people with this story and it can grow and become, a really popular fantasy franchise, which is what the hope is.
And you sort of started answering this a second ago, but, any plans to keep working with them? Is it going to be an ongoing parallel thing, do you think, for the foreseeable future?
It would definitely be an ongoing parallel thing with Steve. I don't know if it will continue to be. Look, potentially, yeah. I mean, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So I think we'll wait and see. I mean, like, I guess it depends really on if is it going to be, if people like it. Because it's. I was actually making this point to Dave, the band's manager, the other day, or a while back. I was saying, look, it all depends on how well these books sell. I mean, if it's kind of like a movie. You go and see a movie and there's, it's only part one of a trilogy. But if the movie bombs in the cinemas, Hollywood aren't going to come back and go, let's just make the other two just so we can round it out nicely and tell the story. That's not going to happen. So the same goes with this. If it doesn't connect with people and we don't get that kind of thing where the book becomes recommended and liked and well reviewed and all that kind of stuff, well, you don't keep flogging a dead horse. You go and find a new horse. So but I hope that it does, and that's certainly the plan. There is more than 2 books written. So it would be a tragedy if that didn't happen, but it won't. What I will tell you is it's not going to take another bloody 7 years.
Absolutely. And you've got other projects in the works, one of which you sent to me, which I read and very much enjoyed. Tell us about other projects you've got, and especially Bare Bum Billy.
Well, I haven't announced that yet, but it will be.
Was I not meant to say that?
No, you're all good, mate.
The title?
I'm happy to talk about it because I plan to launch that soon. I'm launching a crowdfund for a children's picture book that I've written called Bare Bum Billy, and the title says it all. Really, it's about a little boy that strips off and runs around naked in the most inappropriate places. So. And has a silly song that he sings. So very different to the Wyvern and the Wolf, like thematically.
Big contrast.
Big contrast. It's a very silly, kind of slightly satirical book, and this kid runs wild in a supermarket and at church. And,
church seems a classic. I loved it.
Yeah. Like he does it everywhere, and like it's all very rhymey kind of the rhyming couplets that kids love. So. For me, when I grew up, and partly where my love of writing came from and storytelling, my mum and dad would always read stories to me. And I think it's the best thing any parent could ever do for a kid is to actually read stories to them every night. Like it teaches them to read, it teaches them about characters, it teaches them empathy, it teaches them connection, human. Like it's just, even if you don't have kids, I think that's something that you know, and even if you've ever read a story to a kid, it's a magical thing. So for me, it was just like when I put the final dot and crossed the final T on The Wyvern and the Wolf, it was like, I actually need a break. I need to not dive into this grim, dark world where people are getting disemboweled and eaten, and you know, there's monsters and you know samurai that drink blood and a whole range of kind of stuff, which is all in the book. I was just like, okay, what can I do that's fun? And my wife actually said to me, I give credit to her, she said, I want you to sit down this weekend and write that story you've got for Bare Bum Billy. Because the story for Bare Bum Billy came from this silly song I used to sing my own kids when they get out of the bath, and when they're really young, they don't care. They run around wild in the backyard, you know, starking rave naked, not caring. And I think that, you know, some people have are a bit prudish about that kind of stuff, whereas it's actually, when you see that innocence, you actually realize we have nothing. It's just such a social construct that we care about things like that, you know, whereas kids, it's okay. I'm not suggesting that we all take off our clothes and run down the street, or it could be liberating. I don't know. I haven't tried it, but that was kind of the motivation. Essentially, it was like, how can I get out of this grim, dark world to somewhere that's light and fun, you know, that I can do something completely different with. So that's what Bare Bum Billy is, and I think I'm really excited about Bare Bum Billy. So this year has been quite a productive year for me creatively. It feels like it's all coming out now, like a pimple that has to be popped. And actually, that's a really horrible analogy, but you get what I mean.
Squirt at the mirror.
It's all coming out now, and I'm pretty excited about it. And so, yes, I have this very grim, dark fantasy novel, but I've also got this wonderful, beautifully illustrated, children's book. And in fact, if it's all right, I should actually call out the illustrator, who's an amazing Australian political cartoonist called Glenn Lelevre.
Right.
And he is, you've probably seen his stuff on Facebook and stuff like that. It's just, he brought to life my very pedantic briefs for every single image in a way that was, you know, really inspired. So I'm excited, and I hope that I will be launching the crowdfund soon. So I'm hoping that everyone gets on board.
Yep. Fantastic. Billy's dad looks like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Has that been pointed out?
It actually has been pointed out.
Right.
The weird thing was,
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No. And I actually like that. I mean, obviously it's not Shaggy, but he has that little tuft of beard kind of thing, the thing on his beard. Yeah, he does. I actually, weirdly, this is going to sound bizarre, but he was actually, when I briefed the illustrator, I said, can you make him look like Kyle Lionheart from the singer-songwriter from Byron?
Right.
That was what the brief was on. I wanted him to look like Kyle Lionheart from Byron Bay. And he ended up not looking like that at all. But it was okay. If Kyle Lionheart is watching this video, you were going to be immortalized forever. Unfortunately, that's not happening anymore. Instead, we've gone back to Scooby-Doo, and hey, that's what's wrong with Scooby-Doo?
Nothing wrong at all. Nothing wrong. So, any parting words for the listeners and the viewers out there at this stage?
If you need a good book for Christmas, for your dad, your brother, yourself, your husband, your boyfriend, and he's into, Game of Thrones or all things kind of shogun and Japanese feudal kind of adventure, then you can buy The Wyvern and the Wolf, and you will they'll love you for it. Likewise, if you've got kids, Bare Bum Billy's about to come out, and this will not only put this is a surefire strategy to steal Santa Claus's thunder by buying this instead. So, because I guarantee you, Santa won't be putting it in your stocking. It's going to come from your cool uncle or grandfather or dad who wants to have a laugh at the same time as reading.
Fantastic. Excellent, mate. Thanks so much for chatting to us. Really enjoyed the talk.
Likewise.
And, very much. Good luck with their release of the Ninja album and the book, all coming out as we speak
Rod.
here this coming Friday.
Thanks, Rod. I really appreciate it, mate. And good luck with Brides of Vampira as well.
No worries.
I can't wait to see it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Buddy.
See ya. Bye.
Where did the song go? Where have you been and what have you gone? I've been waiting for you to when you come and join us. So have it up, have it up, have it up, have it up, have it up.